Hey guys, so this is the video screencast about incentives. So basically in this screencast I'm going to talk through each of the definitions of incentives, which you can see listed here below or above. I'm actually not sure where compared to my face you're seeing this, probably like up and to the left. But anyway, so you can see all of the different incentives here. And then we're going to do some various scenarios. So we already did a couple of the scenarios and I'm going to talk through a few more, and then I'm going to leave you to do the rest of the scenarios on your own, and they are due in class tomorrow. So we have 4 different kinds of incentives. So first we have moral incentives, then we have social incentives, so moral incentives, social incentives, then we've got economic incentives and coercive incentives. So as you can see here, an incentive is any kind of expectation, reward, motivation, or punishment that encourages an individual or a group of individuals to behave in a certain way. So in other words, we're trying to get people to do something that we want them to do. So that could be anything from not murdering people, it could be to do us a favor, it could be to act or dress or think a certain way. Any of those things can be done through incentives. So let's take a look at the 4 different kinds of incentives that we have. Oh, and actually before I move on, also you can see right below, so right down here, incentives can be used to get more of something that is desirable or less of something that is not desirable. So we can convince people to do more of the things that we want them to do and less of the things that we don't want them to do. All right, anyway, so our 4 types of incentives are here. So let's go to a different color, blue. So our 4 different kinds of incentives are here. So first we have moral incentives, right? So moral incentives are based around ideas of right and wrong. So they can often be related to religion, right? So you can see this picture of this angel over here, right? So it's because it's good or it's bad. So it needs to be based on a belief system though. Now different people have different belief systems, so Christians versus Muslims versus Hindus versus atheists, but it needs to be based in some larger idea of what is morally right and wrong. So for example, you might say, you should not say mean things to other people because God told us to love our neighbor. So that is based in a moral system, Christianity, so it is a moral incentive. Or you could say, as human beings, it is our responsibility to treat all people with love, kindness, and respect because we should treat people as we would like to be treated. So that is a humanist standpoint, but it's still moral because humanism is based on beliefs about what's right and wrong in the world. So we had Christianity, humanism, any belief system. So that is the definition of morality. Next up, we have social incentives. This is based on what other people think about us, not based on what's right or wrong, but what other people think. So for example, if other people think that Jordans are really cool, then I might choose to wear Jordans so that people will think I'm a cool person, right? So this is based entirely on other people's feelings about me. It's not based on what a holy book says, it's not based on a philosophy or a religion, it's based on what other people think about me. So, for example, if you want someone to think you're attractive, you might go to the gym. Next up, economic incentives. This is pretty straightforward. Economic incentives are there whenever you get something tangible in return for your behavior. So this could be money, it could be gold, it could be a car, it could be a kiss. Something tangible as a reward for your behavior. So you want to be rich someday, so you get really good grades in school, because that's how you know you're going to be rich. So being rich was the incentive to get good grades in school. Finally, coercive incentives. So this is when we think of like punishments or something along those lines. So when you do something to avoid being physically punished or having something taken away from you. So for example, laws about crime, those are all coercive incentives because if you speed, you get a ticket and you lose some money. If you hurt somebody, you might go to jail. If you steal, if you that's most of what crime is about, like going places you're not supposed to go, hurting other people, taking things that aren't yours, etc. So there are laws about all of those things, and those are coercive incentives. So at this point, we have discussed the 4 kinds of incentives: moral, based on your philosophy or your religion about what's right or wrong; social, based on what other people think of you; economic, based on getting a physical reward; and finally, coercive, based on being physically punished, pain, or having something taken away from you. So let's do a couple scenarios. First, we looked at this scenario in class. If you are caught with your cell phone out in class during the school day, the teacher is going to take it away from you and make you pay to get it back. So the answer is, of course, coercive, because you're having something taken away from you. So to answer this question correctly, you would say something along the following lines. You would need to say, this is an example of a coercive incentive, period. Coercive incentives attempt to change behavior through physical punishment or by taking something away from a person. This incentive involved taking away a student's cell phone, so it is coercive. So there are 3 important parts to our answer that we've talked about several times in class. So let me make that bigger. So first, we have our identify. So I'm going to highlight our identify let's see, I can't find highlight. I'm going to turn it red. So coercive incentive, that's our identify. We identify the type of incentive. Next, we're going to define. So I'm going to highlight that in blue. So this is our definition of a coercive incentive. Finally, we explain. So this is our explanation. So I'm going to highlight that in purple. Okay, so the 3 points are identify, define, explain. So for all of our scenarios, that is something that you would need to do. All right, guys, sorry, there was a little bit of a location change. So not sure where that came from, but a YouTube link. Let's start over. Taking away students. It's all fine. Okay, so remember, you need identify, define, and explain. So let's take a look at the next example. So nature calls, so you decide to swing by the restroom on the way to class. So using the bathroom. So like we discussed in class, there are actually a couple of different things that we could say here. So first, we could say that this is a social incentive. So this is an example of a social incentive. Social incentives attempt to change people's behavior based on what other people think about them. People do things to gain the positive attitudes of others. So in this scenario, the person chooses to go to the restroom instead of peeing in public, we'll say. So people would definitely have a negative feeling in order to keep people's positive opinion, because most people would not think good things about a person who peed in public. Okay, so that's option number 1. Notice that we have our identify in red, our define in blue, and then our explain again in purple. So that would get us all 3 points. Next up, We can do the same thing, but remember this could also be a coercive incentive. So this is an example. Oh, I need to go back to black. Okay, so this is, nope, still purple. This is, okay, it's bothering me. Become black. There we go. Is an example of a coercive incentive. Coercive incentives attempt to change people's behavior through physical pain and punishment, or by taking something away from a person, since it can become really painful if a person does not pee. This person chose to pee instead of suffering the physical pain. Okay, so coercive incentive again is in red. The definition of coercive incentive in blue, and the because, the explanation in purple. All right, and we're gonna do one more. There are actually 10, so I'm gonna do one more, and then you'll do the rest on your own. You want to go to college someday because you've been told repeatedly that going to college is the right thing to do. Also, you want to set a good example for your younger siblings. Now, this one's tricky because even though it says the right thing to do, right, this is really not a moral incentive. Why? Because God doesn't care if you go to college. No religion or moral system cares about going to college. When we say you've been told it's the right thing to do, and you want to set a good example, that's actually a social incentive, right? Because it's based on what other people think about you. Do you want people to think that you're smart and that you're on the right track? Then you go to college. Do you want your younger siblings to think you're a good older brother or sister? That's about what other people think of you. So it's actually a social incentive, not a moral incentive. Now, we could say you want to go away to college someday because, you know, you had a conversation with God, it says in the Bible, because, you know, a moral or philosophical system, Confucianism, whichever one, told you that it was the right thing to do. But if other people are telling you it's the right thing to do, that's a social incentive, not a moral incentive. So, new slide, same as before. This is an example of a social incentive. I can actually copy some of that from here. This is an example of a social incentive. Social incentives attempt to change people's behavior based on what other people think about them. In this example, a person chooses to go to college because other people, including siblings, would see you more positively, look up to you if you go. All right, and that's it. So here are the rest of the scenarios. So you should pause because I'm not going to let it sit forever. So as I show each scenario, you should pause it and then do the same thing on your own paper. Here's scenario 4, scenario 5, scenario 6, scenario 7, scenario 8, scenario 9, and scenario 10. And that's it. Thanks a lot, guys.